men's basketball coach Nicki Collen with me, David Smoke on 365 Sports. So how did your team, in your opinion, you beat Harvard Sunday, how did they handle the big win against Utah, and did they remain focused and locked in?
I think they did. I think it was going to be a tough game either way. I don't think people understand how good Harvard is. I think it was such a trap game for us, and it would have been that way regardless of win or losing to Utah. I think, if our tails were between our legs after losing to Utah, it would have been an easy game to lose because of how tough Harvard is and how physical they play and their 5-out style and system, and along with Harmony Turner, who can go get points, or winning, keeping them focused on, okay, we had a good game, but that doesn't mean we're elite yet. We have to prove that we're truly elite. And so, I think we had moments, which you're going to have early in the season anyway, regardless of whether you've played a top 10 team or not played a top 10 team. So just trying to keep them focused on building blocks, getting better day in and day out. Okay, our ball screen coverage wasn't good enough. How do we improve that? What areas do we need to shore up? And so, I certainly don't think we were overconfident. I think we made them feel like Harvard was a really good team because we truly believed as a staff that they were.
What do you enjoy the most, or what are you better at? And don't have to rank them in order, but game planning, coaching, practice on the floor, fundamentals, et cetera, that type of part, X's and O's for a game or during a game, or recruiting?
Oh, wow. This is good question. I mean, I think I thrive in-game X's and O's, planning. How do we beat a team? How do we maximize our strengths? What's going to work in this game? I think I'm pretty good at reading adjustments in-game. But I enjoy the teaching. I enjoy being on the court. I enjoy having players, kind of grow and develop and figure it out. And recruiting, I like people. I mean, it doesn't mean I love to recruit all the time, but I certainly understand that it's the lifeblood of a program, and I'm only as good as the players I recruit. And so, it has to be a primary focus. And I do enjoy meeting people, and, but if I had to say, like, what do I love the most? It's probably the chess match, the in-game chess match. Like, what are they doing? How do we counteract that? What are they doing with our ball screens? What can we tweak to be good?
I have this question. So in a football game, a guy, let's say it's 3rd and 7, they know if they get the first down, it's first down. They got the play call, all that sheet. In basketball, can you think a play ahead, or do you have to be in the moment?
It's a little of both. We certainly go in. To me, I'm going to go in with, even if our playbook is, let's just say 30 plays, I'm going to say, okay, these are the 8 that I feel like are really going to be effective tonight. And maybe it's keeping the ball in the middle third of the floor. Maybe it's, they're not as good in 2-man action, or they're not as good in 3-man action. And so I think you have to have a plan going in. We may script the first 2 or 3 plays, but then we have to see, okay, what are they doing differently maybe against us that they didn't do? Harvard had pressed a ton leading up to our game. They didn't press one possession. And so, you have that where as the game's going along, you have to figure out what's working, who needs the ball, where do they need the ball, what are the matchups. Like, we're in a unique situation this year with kind of having these hybrid players that we're not always sure how the opponents are going to match up, and so there are times when, our mismatch will be with Asia, our mismatch will be with Bella, our mismatch will be with Dre, and it's about recognizing where those are at and how we can kind of move them around to get them in the best position to be successful.
You mentioned the hybrids, and you have, at least, and knock on wood, it's a game that can have attrition, but you have so much depth, so many parts. Is it almost like you have been hamstrung at times, not with that the first couple of years? Is it like sometimes you're like, wow, we've got a lot of different weapons in different ways?
Absolutely, I feel that way. It's you look at the end of the game or even watching the Utah game back and, Danae only played 6 minutes, but they were really, really good minutes. And I'm thinking to myself, I need to get her more minutes because her toughness showed. I thought if we're going to switch screens, she did such a good job of switching screens. And the reasons we brought her here, they really came out, when you saw her compete at that level. Yaya was in foul trouble against Harvard, so only had 8 minutes. But you can see how electric she can be in short bursts. And so, it's kind of the pieces moving around and keeping the players. You look at a lot of box scores, and most teams play 7, maybe 8 players. And so when you're trying to play 8, 9, 10, it's utilizing them the right way. The good part is it helps keep them accountable. You're going to show up and you can compete every day, because if you don't, there's somebody that's ready to take those minutes, which is a good problem as a coach. But at times, you do want to give people minutes, but you're careful not to keep, the Sarah Andrews from getting into a flow.
Talking to Nicki Collen, Baylor women's basketball coach, with us on 365 Sports. With you now having I mentioned this last time we spoke, your daughter and your son now here with you, has that allowed you to have in-person sounding board, just someone else to talk to more often? I know you had communication, your family on the road, your husband, et cetera, but is it different having them in person to lean on a little bit more?
The best thing about having them around is just seeing them, being able, I know, it was pretty magical for that Reese cheered the Utah game. And, she was tearing up after the game. It's fun when your kids can articulate how proud they are of you, because as parents, we constantly take so much pride in our kids and who they are and what they do and their successes. And so I think it's just been great for me to have the in-person support, to be able to put my arms around them, to see them, to smile, to laugh. My daughter and I are doing a puzzle tonight. It's just something the family does when we get together for the holidays. We're always playing games and doing puzzles. And, but I'm still, most nights they're college students. They're doing their thing. And so I still come home and kind of do the work that I've always done. But, I get to touch them about 5 days a week. My son's super invested, comes to practice, does his homework, and may come to practice for an hour. But just is around a lot. And so they're just having a good time being around the program right now.
Did the Utah win validate what you're doing?
I'm not sure I understand. I hope so. I've always believed that I know what I'm doing as a basketball coach, and I think, we have good players, and our staff has done a good job recruiting really good players. And I think these are the type of games that truly, I've said it before, but that I came to play in, that I came to play for. And so, you just enjoy, if you're a competitor, you enjoy those moments because it's an opportunity for your players to showcase, what they're capable of. And at the same time, when there's all this hype surrounding certain teams, you want to prove that you count, and that you can be in those conversations. So I mean, look, I don't ever expect not to be the best. It's just, I was born with those expectations. And so, we want to prove that that's who we are and who we can be, and everybody's going to skin a cat differently. How Iowa plays is different than how Virginia Tech plays, which is how it's different from how Stanford plays. But I think there's a lot of ways to successfully, play basketball. And so I think we're just kind of showing our brand. And, I think we're just tapping the surface. I'm frustrated with our offense, and we're shooting around 50% and scoring in the mid-80s every game. And I'm thinking, like, man, we made these 15 mistakes. We're going to start scoring 100 points, and we're not, we're scoring 80 points against good teams. So I think we have a lot of room to grow still and get better. And I think on the defensive side, we have a ton of room to grow. So I think this team still has a long ways to go. But I think the Utah game was hopefully a big building block for our fans, for hopefully our student crowd, for people
Yep.
to see that what our brand of basketball can really be fun to watch. Because I do think how we play is fun to watch.
You have this stretch now with McNeese, Alcorn State, SMU, without getting too far ahead, then Oregon around the corner in early December. Do you use non-conference games, or does it depend on the opponent to kind of play or tweak a little bit towards what you're going to need to do either against another quality non-conference opponent or when the Big 12 battering ram begins? Is that something that kind of just comes naturally? And do you have so many players that getting a rotation or cutting it to a certain number will be difficult?
I think the rotation is going to potentially depend on the opponent, the style. I think, when teams have a traditional big, it allows us to play, Letty and Kyla really effectively at the 5. I think it's tough when a Harvard plays 5 out and everything they do is screening and we're switching and, they would have been caught in mismatches all night. I prefer to put players in position to be successful. And so I think these games are about, continuing to grow in terms, like, how are we going to get better day to day? There's a lot of areas that no matter who we play, we have to get better in. At the same time, we face, a hard hedging ball screen defense against Harvard. We faced an ice ball screen man-to-man team, in Utah. We're about to face a tandem 2-3 team that's probably going to play 2-3 zone for the whole game. So you really are like, okay, this is when you want to execute and prove that you're going to be really good against zone, and you're not going to just rely on swinging it around the perimeter and making threes, but playing inside out, working it into the high post, using your short corners, and really developing your zone attack, because we will face teams that are going to play zone. Kansas State plays some zone in our league. And so Iowa State always plays some zone. So when you look at your non-conference opponents, they're going to present something different every night. We're watching McNeese right now. They may not be an offensive juggernaut, but they play 4 out, 1 in. They throw it into the post and they run splits where they're going to screen guard to guard on the perimeter and make reads. Well, we haven't faced that, but Texas Tech does that. So it's good for us to start to prepare for, defending splits on the perimeter when the ball goes into the post, and really being good in our communication and talking and not getting blindsided by screens. And so I do think the non-conference, it's like you see a little bit of everything. And you obviously see different levels of talent, different size, and expectations in games are different, how deep you can go. But I do think we've got to figure that core group out that can shift depending on opponent. If we need a lineup that can really shoot it because they're really congesting the paint, then we've got to play a lineup that can shoot the ball from the perimeter. Because I don't think you can dare us to shoot if that's how you want to play.
You have in a conference with Oklahoma, Kansas State, which they had the great win recently against Iowa, Texas unbeaten, and, of course, you beat number 4 Utah. And that doesn't mean others aren't. There's a lot of teams unbeaten. A lot of times in non-conference they are. But the Big 12's had some pretty salty non-conference wins. How much have you paid attention to that?
I watch basketball every night. I'm a nerd. So I watch I watched the Kansas State game. Not shocked. They beat Iowa a year ago without Ayoka.
Mm-hmm.
And now they know, Kansas State knows who they are. And I think some teams this time of year are developing identity. Kansas State knows we're going to play 4 around Lee, and we're going to throw it into her, and you're going to have to decide whether you're going to single her up or double, and then she's going to read kick out, and I'm going to throw one more. And, and so they're really good at what they do, and they slowed the pace. They kept length on Caitlin Clark, and so huge win for them. Not surprised by it. I think everyone knew they had a chance to be really, really good if Lee got back and was healthy. I think TCU, while, their schedule hasn't been as tough, I think what they're getting out of Sedona Prince is really impressive. And Madison Connor, 2 transfers from the Pac, has been good. Texas probably hasn't been tested yet, but they'll get UConn sooner than later and have a chance to evaluate where they're at. And certainly their style, they have everyone returning. So I think our league is really, really good. I think people are surprised that OU is good, but I just think they're very system driven, and they're going to recruit players that can shoot it and are going to be aggressive and run up and down the court. And so if they make enough shots, I think they can beat anybody on any given night, which they proved against Ole Miss. And so, I think it's a league that has a lot of different styles, but a lot of talented coaches, a lot of talented players. And, people aren't talking about the Big 12 as much as they're talking about the Pac-12 because of how many teams they've got in the top 5 and top 10. But I think we have a lot of really, really good teams in this league.
I got one final question. And by the way, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the holidays with the family. When you are on a timeout and you have that board with your Sharpie or whatever it is, right, eraser board, do you have pretty handwriting during that time? Is it chicken scratch or does it look like a doctor's prescription?
Oh, very, very pretty.
Oh.
Yeah, no, those are, it's funny. I had, when Chloe worked for me last year, she said I was the first coach she ever worked for whose hand didn't shake at all.
Wow.
In those moments, it's like I always feel like that's like my sandbox when I just get to play. And it's so often an opportunity to like take something like I write a lot of stuff leading up to games, actions. Even before the Utah game, I spent the last hour before I came out just really, really dialed into this could be a really close game. Like, what do I want to run if we're down 3 and there's 8 seconds to go? Like, what are we going to run if we're down 3 and there's 2 seconds to go? And so much of that is not just like, hey, I'm pulling it out of thin air. But it's almost like one of the things I've been really lucky with and considered blessed with is I have a fairly photographic memory.
Okay.
And so when I've drawn something up before, when I've seen it before, if I see it, a great play on a Twitter feed that they're posting with Jokic and an NBA play, whatever, it's still like I can pull that pretty much instantly and say, okay, this would work in this situation. And so to me, my biggest issue sometimes on the board is making sure I know which 5 are in the game, especially if it's a 30-second timeout and everyone's standing as opposed to sitting in front of me, and making sure I get initials right, and at this level, you got to make sure the board is turned in the correct direction. Because if you don't turn the board so that it looks exactly like the court directly in front of the team, they'll get turned around. And so it's little things like that that you didn't have to worry about in the pros that you got to make sure, that's a JW for Jada Walker, and it's
right.
So I use initials for everything. I don't know how anyone uses those magnet boards and puts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and moves them around. Because we really don't have 3s, 4s, and 5s in a lot of settings, so everything is very initial driven. So that's about, sometimes I'll get Sarah Andrews and she'll be at the point and then she'll be over on the wing as well.
Nicki Collen, Baylor women's basketball coach on 365 Sports.